The night air hung heavy over the 7 hills of Rome as Basilius Kornelian, a senior centurion in the legions of Emperor Trajan, stood at the edge of the command tent. Before him lay maps of Dacia, the troublesome territory north of the Danube that had defied Roman authority for decades. It was 101 CE, and Rome was preparing for what would become known as Trajan's Dacian Wars. "You see, Gaiana," Basilius said to his daughter, who had accompanied him on this campaign as part of her education, "what makes Rome different is not simply our legions or our wealth. It is how we think." Gaiana Antonina, just 17 and already showing the sharp intellect that had convinced her father to break with tradition and educate her in matters of state, studied the maps carefully. "But father, Dacia has mountains, fortresses, and a unified people under King Decebalus. Their warriors are fierce." Basilius nodded. "Indeed. Yet we will prevail, not through superior numbers alone, but through superior systems." This exchange, though personal, reflected a fundamental truth about Roman strategic thinking that resonates across millennia. While many civilizations built impressive empires through conquest, Rome's enduring legacy stems from systematic approaches to power, governance, and expansion that transcended individual emperors or generals. Rome's rise from a small city-state on the Tiber to ruler of the known world between 509 BCE and 117 CE represents one of history's most remarkable achievements. At its height under Trajan, the Roman Empire encompassed over 5 million square kilometers and governed between 50 to 90 million people, approximately 20% of the world's population. What differentiated Roman strategic thinking? Several key principles emerge from historical analysis. First, the Romans understood that military victory without administrative follow-through was meaningless. After conquering territories, they implemented sophisticated governance systems. When Gnaeus Julius Agricola completed the conquest of Britannia around 84 CE, he did not simply garrison troops. As Tacitus recorded, Agricola introduced the amenities of civilization, public buildings, temples, forums, and private houses. He trained the sons of chiefs in liberal arts, and the result was that those who had once rejected the Latin language now sought fluency and eloquence in it. This strategy of cultural assimilation, what we might call winning the peace, created stakeholders rather than subjects. By 212 CE, when Emperor Caracalla granted citizenship to all free men throughout the empire via the Constitutio Antoniniana, he was formalizing a process centuries in the making. In 106 CE, Basilius witnessed this strategy firsthand as Trajan's forces finally defeated Decebalus. "Observe carefully," he told Gaiana as Roman engineers immediately began constructing roads, aqueducts, and administrative centers in the newly conquered province. Other empires maintain control through fear alone. Rome builds. Within decades, Dacia would become one of the empire's most valuable provinces, producing gold, silver, and grain, while adopting Roman customs, language, and law. This transformation was not accidental but deliberate imperial policy. The second principle of Roman strategic thinking involved infrastructure as an instrument of power. The Romans understood that physical connections created economic and military advantages. By the 2nd century CE, the empire had constructed over 250,000 miles of roads, 50,000 miles of which were paved highways connecting major cities. In 312 BCE, Rome built its first major road, the Via Appia, initially connecting Rome to Capua. As the empire expanded, so did this road network, allowing troops to move rapidly across vast distances. A legion could march approximately 20 miles per day on Roman roads, meaning reinforcements could reach a threatened frontier within weeks rather than months. "Our roads are not merely stone and gravel," Basilius explained to Gaiana as they traveled the Via Flaminia. "They are the sinews that bind the empire together. Notice how each milestone marks the distance to Rome. All roads lead to the capital, both physically and symbolically." This infrastructure facilitated not just military movement but commerce, communication, and cultural exchange. Roman roads remained in use for centuries after the empire's fall, some forming the basis of modern European highways. The third principle involved pragmatic flexibility in governance. While many ancient empires demanded uniformity, Rome permitted significant local autonomy as long as taxes were paid and Roman authority acknowledged. This approach reduced administrative costs and resistance. In 74 CE, Emperor Vespasian extended Latin rights to all of Hispania, allowing local elites to maintain their positions while incorporating them into the Roman system. This co-option of existing power structures rather than their replacement became standard practice. Do you see how Governor Longinus allows the local council to continue managing day-to-day affairs? Basilius asked Gaiana during their visit to a provincial capital in 112 CE. They collect our taxes, enforce our laws, but maintain their traditions where they do not conflict with Roman interests. This is why people accept our rule. We demand loyalty, not uniformity. The fourth principle involved meritocratic advancement. While Rome was never a perfect meritocracy, it provided more pathways to advancement than most ancient societies. Emperor Pertinax began as the son of a freed slave before rising to the purple in 193 CE. Generals like Flavius Stilicho, a Vandal by birth, could command Roman armies. This relative openness allowed Rome to harness talent regardless of origin. By the late Empire, many top generals and officials came from frontier provinces, bringing fresh perspectives to leadership. When Gaiana questioned why a barbarian held high rank in the legion, Basilius replied, "Rome cares less about where a man was born than what he can contribute." That Batavian has proved his worth in 3 campaigns. Would you rather have a mediocre Roman or an exceptional provincial guarding our borders? The fifth principle involved adaptive military doctrine. Roman legions evolved continuously over centuries, incorporating new tactics, weapons, and organizational structures as circumstances demanded. After suffering devastating defeats against Hannibal during the Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BCE, Rome reorganized its legions into more flexible units with standardized equipment and training. When faced with the mounted archers of Parthia, who destroyed Crassus' legions at Carrhae in 53 BCE, Rome developed its own cavalry units and adjusted tactics. When Germanic tribes proved difficult to defeat in dense forests, Rome adapted with lighter infantry and specialized auxiliaries. "A fool fights yesterday's battles," Basilius told his officers before an engagement. Study your enemy, understand the terrain, and adapt accordingly. The legion that defeated Carthage would fail against today's opponents. We prevail because we evolve. The sixth principle centered on engineering as a force multiplier. Roman military engineers could construct bridges across major rivers in days, build siege works that neutralized enemy advantages, and create defensive fortifications that multiplied the effectiveness of garrison troops. During Trajan's Dacian campaigns, Roman engineers built a massive bridge across the Danube in 105 CE under the direction of Apollodorus of Damascus. This engineering marvel, over 1,135 meters long, allowed Roman legions to move quickly into enemy territory and maintain supply lines. "Our greatest weapon is not the gladius but the shovel," Basilius explained to young officers. "Each legionary carries tools as well as weapons. While our enemies rest, we build. What they consider impossible, we accomplish before breakfast." This engineering mindset extended beyond military applications. Roman aqueducts, like the Pont du Gard in southern Gaul completed around 60 CE, transported water over vast distances with minimal elevation drop. These systems delivered hundreds of millions of liters of fresh water daily to major cities, supporting populations that would have been impossible otherwise. The seventh principle involved strategic patience and institutional continuity. Unlike empires dependent on single charismatic leaders, Rome built institutions that transcended individuals. The Senate, despite its flaws, provided continuity across centuries. Administrative systems survived bad emperors. Military traditions endured despite occasional defeats. Rome's war against Carthage lasted 118 years across 3 separate conflicts before final victory in 146 BCE. Its conquest of Greece required decades of persistent effort. The subjugation of Gaul under Julius Caesar took 8 years of sustained campaigns from 58 to 50 BCE. "Other peoples fight until they are tired," Basilius observed. "Rome fights until it wins. If not this year, then next. If not under this emperor, then the next. Our strength is not in single victories but in our unwillingness to accept final defeat." This institutional resilience allowed Rome to absorb tremendous setbacks. After the disastrous Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 CE, where Germanic tribes annihilated 3 legions under Publius Quinctilius Varus, Emperor Augustus reportedly banged his head against the wall crying, "Varus, give me back my legions." Yet Rome did not abandon its interests in Germania, it adjusted its frontier policy and continued operations. The 8th principle involved psychological operations and reputation management. Rome understood that perception shaped reality in international relations. Roman punishment of enemies was deliberately spectacular. Carthage was not merely defeated but utterly destroyed in 146 BCE, its land sown with salt to symbolize permanent devastation. Conversely, Roman rewards for loyalty were equally visible. Cities that allied with Rome received privileges, trade benefits, and protection. This created powerful incentives for cooperation rather than resistance. When we crucified the captured rebels along the Via Appia, Basilius explained grimly to Gaiana after suppressing a revolt, it was not from cruelty alone. One example prevents 10 battles. Now the other provinces will remember the cost of defiance. By 115 CE, Basilius had risen to become a trusted advisor to Emperor Trajan himself, present during the conquest of Mesopotamia that extended Roman boundaries to their greatest extent. "You have been fortunate," Gaiana observed during a quiet moment as they stood before a map of the empire in the imperial palace, to serve during Rome's golden age. Basilius shook his head. "No empire lasts forever, daughter. Rome has achieved greatness not because we are superior beings but because we built superior systems. Yet systems require maintenance. The principles that brought us here must be remembered and renewed." His words proved prescient. Within a century of Trajan's death, Rome would face severe challenges. The Antonine Plague beginning in 165 CE killed perhaps 5 million people, economic crises devalued the currency, and political instability led to the crisis of the 3rd century when 26 men claimed the title of emperor in just 50 years. Yet even in decline, Rome's strategic principles allowed it to adapt and survive. When traditional legions proved inadequate against new threats, Emperor Diocletian and Constantine reorganized the military around 300 CE, creating a more mobile field army and static frontier forces. When old administrative systems faltered, Diocletian's tetrarchy established a new governance model. When the Western Empire finally fell in 476 CE, the eastern portion continued for nearly a millennium as the Byzantine Empire. What relevance do these Roman strategic principles have today? First, successful organizations build systems rather than depending on individual talent alone. Rome's standardized administrative practices and institutional knowledge allowed effective governance across vast territories despite communication limitations we can hardly imagine. Today's most resilient organizations similarly develop systems that transcend any single leader. Second, infrastructure creates lasting advantage. Roman roads served imperial needs but continued generating economic benefits for centuries after. Modern equivalents include digital infrastructure, educational systems, and research facilities that create long-term competitive advantage. Third, pragmatic flexibility outperforms rigid ideology. Rome's willingness to incorporate useful aspects of conquered cultures, from Greek philosophy to Egyptian engineering to Persian administrative practices, enriched its civilization. Organizations that remain dogmatically pure often find themselves outmaneuvered by more adaptable competitors. Fourth, inclusive talent development expands capabilities. Rome's relative openness to provincial elites and even exceptional non-citizens broadened its leadership pool. Modern organizations that draw talent from diverse backgrounds similarly access wider perspectives and capabilities. Fifth, continuous adaptation prevents stagnation. The Roman military of 100 CE bore little resemblance to the forces that fought Carthage, having evolved through centuries of lesson learning. Organizations that view their practices as permanently optimal risk obsolescence. Sixth, psychological factors often determine outcomes before physical confrontation begins. Rome's reputation for both terrible retribution and generous reward shaped others' decisions to resist or cooperate. Today's leading organizations similarly cultivate reputations that deter competitors and attract partners. In 117 CE, as Emperor Trajan lay dying in Cilicia, he summoned Basilius for a final conversation. According to accounts Gaiana later recorded, Trajan reflected on the empire he had expanded to unprecedented size. "I conquered Dacia and Mesopotamia," the emperor reportedly said, "but Rome's true conquest has been time itself. We build not just for our generation but for 1,000 years hence. Others achieve glory. Rome achieves permanence." As we study Roman strategic thought today, we find not just ancient history but practical wisdom. Their understanding of systems, infrastructure, governance, talent, adaptation, engineering, and psychology transcended their era. The empire fell, as all human creations eventually must, but the principles that built it remain as relevant in corporate boardrooms and government ministries today as they were in the Roman Senate 2,000 years ago. In a world obsessed with disruption and revolutionary change, Rome's evolutionary, systematic approach to complex problems offers a powerful counterpoint. The true Roman legacy is not the glory of conquest but the patient building of institutions, infrastructure, and systems that outlasted their creators.